on the record in the matter of People versus Scott Lee Peterson tonight.
Scott Peterson was sentenced to life without parole for the murder of his wife Laci and their unborn child, a case that has shocked the public for 20 years. However, Scott Peterson has finally broken his silence, causing a stir in the public eye once again. Will his revelations change the story? His answers will open up new perspectives, and we will explore these surprising revelations together. Let us begin with the day of the sad occurrence and Scott Peterson's early childhood before we go into the details of his admissions. Laci Denise Peterson's birth name is Laci Rocha. She was born to Sharon and Dennis Rocha on May 4, 1975. Brent was born in 1971, her elder brother. The dairy farm outside Escalon, California, was owned by her parents, who met while in high school. Along with her parents, Laci enjoyed gardening when she was a kid and worked on the farm. After her parents' divorce a few years later, their once happy family fell apart. While Laci did continue to visit her father on weekends after the divorce, she and her brother were sent to live with their mother in Modesto. Later in life, her mother began an intimate connection with Ron Gransky, who aided in raising Laci beginning when she was 2 years old. Throughout her time in middle and high school, Laci was an active member of the school cheerleading squad. She attended Cal Poly San Luis Obispo after finishing high school with a diploma in ornamental horticulture. Also, Lee Peterson, who owned Crate Packaging Company, was Scott's father. Scott was born on October 24, 1972, in San Diego, California. His mother, Jacqueline Latham, was the proprietor of a La Jolla store. Despite having children from other relationships, Scott was their sole child. While living with his half-brother John in a 2-bedroom flat, he took up golf at a young age. Scott aspired to be a professional golfer and could beat his father in the game by the time he was 14 years old. Phil Mickelson, a future golfing superstar, was even on his high school squad. As a junior in high school, Scott had already established himself as one of San Diego's best golfers. With much anticipation, Scott Peterson joined the Arizona State University golf team in 1990 after receiving a partial golf scholarship. Nevertheless, according to his father Lee's testimony, Scott was disheartened by the formidable competition he faced from Phil Mickelson and another aspiring professional golfer. Adding insult to injury, Scott was dismissed from the squad after Chip Couch, the dad of another young golfer named Chris Couch, found out that Scott had brought Chris out drinking on a recruiting visit. After Chip voiced his displeasure to the golf coach, Scott was benched. Later on, Scott enrolled at California Polytechnic State University after transferring to Cuesta College. He got a degree in agricultural business, even though he wanted to study international business in college. When did the Petersons first meet? Can you tell me about them? What shocking revelations has Scott Peterson made 20 years after Laci's death? Find out by continuing to watch. Relationship and marital life of the Petersons. Laci would drop by to meet a buddy of Scott's who worked at Pacific Cafe in Morro Bay while he was at Cal Poly. Laci informed her mother that she had met her future husband Scott in the middle of 1994 and given him her phone number. After Scott contacted her, they started dating. Scott put his ambitions of becoming a professional golfer on hold to concentrate on his business career as their relationship intensified. After dating for 2 years, the pair decided to live together. Immediately following Laci's graduation in 1997, they tied the knot at the Sycamore Mineral Springs Resort. Laci found employment in the neighboring town of Prunedale, while Scott was finishing up his senior year. At about this time, Scott started his first affair outside of his marriage. However, the specifics of the connection were not made public when it occurred. Soon after that, he and Laci took the initiative to establish The Shack, a sports bar located in San Luis Obispo. In April of 2001, they successfully finalized the sale of The Shack after deciding to relocate to Modesto, which is Laci's hometown, to begin a family by moving there. A cottage with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms was purchased by the Petersons in October of 2000 for the price of $177,000 on Covenant Avenue, which is located in a pleasant area close to East Loma Park. In the meanwhile, Laci began working as a substitute teacher on a part-time basis, and Scott began working for Trade Corp United States of America, a new subsidiary of a European fertilizer firm, earning $5,000 per month before taxes. Laci was well known for her unwavering commitment to becoming the ideal housewife. She took pleasure in activities such as cooking, hosting guests, and watching shows like Martha Stewart. In the year 2002, she discovered that she was expecting a child, and the date of her due date was selected to be February 10, 2003. It all began with a romantic relationship. Through a mutual acquaintance, Scott was connected to Amber Frey, a massage therapist from Fresno, in the month of November in the year 2002. Eventually, this introduction led to many calls to her residence, as well as frequent messages expressing annoyance. It wasn't long before they started to sense a spark between them. Soon after that, they started a love involvement with one another. Laci, who was unaware of the connection, continued to act as if she were a wife and never nagged or pretended to be humorous. On the other hand, it was stated by insiders that Scott intended to get rid of her to allow himself to marry Amber. Having said that, the veracity of this allegation is called into question because Scott disputed it in court. At 5:45 o'clock in the evening on the 23rd of December in the year 2002, Laci and Scott Peterson went to a salon where Laci's sister Amy Rocha was already employed. Every month, Amy would trim Scott's hair, and she did it again. In light of the fact that Scott intended to play golf the next day at a neighboring course, he offered to pick up a fruit basket that Amy had purchased. Afterwards, Scott disclosed to other people that he would also be playing golf on Christmas Eve. At around 8:30 p.m. on that particular evening, Laci's mother, Sharon, had a phone conversation with her daughter, and it was the last time anybody had contact with her. What really took place with Laci Peterson? Who exactly was the mastermind behind such a scheme? Maintain your attention to discover out what really took place with Laci Peterson. Amy, Sharon, and Scott are the only persons who are known to have had the last conversation with Laci before she was reported missing. After some time had passed, Scott reported to the authorities that the last time he saw Laci was on December 24th at around 9:30 a.m., when he departed to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. According to him, Laci was getting ready to sweep the floor, make cookies, and take the family dog Mackenzie for a walk to a local park while she was watching a Martha Stewart television show on Meringue. Around 10:30 in the morning, a neighbor named Karen Service discovered Mackenzie standing by himself outside of the Petersons' house. She then brought him back to the backyard. She then testified that she discovered the dog at 10:18 in the morning. Mike Chiavetta, another neighbor, happened to see Mackenzie at around 10:45 in the morning when he was playing with his dog. As reported by the Modesto Bee, an unidentified female neighbor discovered Mackenzie walking about the neighborhood with a dirty leash. She then placed him in the Petersons' yard, not detecting anything out of the ordinary about the situation whatsoever. Laci received a message from Scott that read, "Hey beautiful, it's 2:15. I'm leaving Berkeley." The message was placed there at 2:15 p.m. However, Scott Peterson reported that he discovered Laci's car parked in the driveway when he arrived home that afternoon. However, the house was vacant. Sharon, Laci's mother, was purportedly informed by him that he had discovered their dog, Mackenzie, in the backyard. He also acknowledged this discovery. Later on, Sharon wrote a book in which she refuted this claim. Following that, Scott took a shower and rinsed his clothing. According to the testimony of a neighbor, Scott had knocked on his door and asked him if he had seen Laci. He also indicated that he had gone golfing on that particular day and had attempted to phone her. According to the testimony of another cousin of Laci's, Scott had informed his friends and family earlier that day that he had gone playing golf. When Scott was calling Sharon to see whether Laci was with her, Sharon mentioned that this was the moment when she found out that Laci had gone missing. The missing person complaint for Laci was filed by Scott and Laci's stepfather, and the police received the report just before 6 p.m. Laci was 7.5 months pregnant at the time, and the date of her due date would be the 10th of February in the year 2003. The case soon garnered the attention of the media across the country. After arriving at the Peterson residence, detectives Alan Brachini and John Bueller of the Modesto Police Department, who were assigned to the investigation, interviewed Scott. The keys, wallet, sunglasses, and handbag belonging to Laci were discovered in a closet during the first check that they made around the residence. After that, the investigators started making preparations for a search of the area. Scott informed them that he had been engaging in sturgeon fishing in the Berkeley Marina, which is around 90 miles away from their residence in Modesto. What then happened to Laci? Did she simply dissolve into thin air? Keep watching to find out. The search for Laci Peterson. On the day that followed Laci Peterson's disappearance, more than 100 members of her family, friends, and neighbors joined together to search the area and distribute flyers announcing her disappearance. During a news conference, Detective Albrocchini claimed that the police felt Laci would not have gone without first alerting her family. He described the situation as being absolutely out of character for her. Over 30 Modesto police officers and firemen participated in the search. They utilized a variety of techniques, like as canine units and searchlight-equipped aircraft, to search through dry creeks in the surrounding regions. The case soon garnered attention from the media around the country. In the beginning, a reward of $25,000 was given for information that would lead to the safe return of Laci. This prize was then boosted to $250,000, and then it was extended to $500,000. Initially, the investigators did not believe the case to be odd, but as the investigation advanced, they rapidly began to feel that there was some sort of foul play involved, and they were increasingly leery of Scott. After some time had passed, Detective John Bueller revealed to ABC News in 2017 that he had been dubious of Scott from the beginning, citing his cool attitude and lack of concern for the situation. On the other hand, rather than seeming outwardly unhappy, Bueller described Scott as having a peculiar blend of courteous and haughty characteristics, as well as appearing disconnected and impatient. The family of Laci supported Scott, portraying him and Laci as the perfect marriage, despite the fact that this was the case. The widespread attention to Laci Peterson's disappearance in the media resulted in a great number of tips and possible sightings of the celebrity. The investigators provided Frey with a recording device so that they could record her discussions with Scott. This was done to obtain further evidence. On January 15, 2003, investigators notified Laci's immediate family about Scott's romance with Amber Frey. This disclosure was made by the police. Almost immediately, Sharon Rocha, Laci's mother, concluded that Scott was involved in her daughter's death. Sharon, Ron, and Laci's brother Brent were present at a press conference held on January 24, 2003. On January 16th, Brent said that Scott had confessed to him that he was having an affair with a woman in Fresno. The relationship was that Scott was having an affair with that woman. Additionally, Brent revealed that the Rocha family had decided to withdraw their support of Scott because he was not cooperating and communicating with both the family and the authorities. In the final hours of that day, Amber Frey held a separate press conference to clarify her role in the investigation. Connor's body was discovered on a beach in the San Francisco Bay Area, near Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Beach Park, on April 13, 2003. The discovery was made by two people walking their dogs. The torso was discovered by a jogger the following day in debris along Point Isabel Beach, about a mile from where Connor was found. Through the use of DNA testing, it was determined on April 18th that the bodies were Laci Peterson and Connor. Dead? Drowned? How? Why was she assassinated? The investigation: who took Laci Peterson's life? Although the autopsy results were sealed, an Associated Press source said that there were signs of minor trauma and that Laci was found with a rope wrapped around her. However, the cause of these injuries and how the rope came to be are still unclear. The body was also decomposed after being in the water for a long time. The autopsy results indicated that there were several injuries, but it was not possible to determine the exact cause or time of the injuries. Forensic experts testified that the injuries were likely related to the immersion, but could not determine the exact date of death. Dr. Peterson concluded that Connor did not survive and was separated due to Laci's decomposition. The discovery of the two bodies shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a criminal case, with Scott Peterson as the prime suspect. The FBI and Modesto Police Department conducted forensic examinations at Peterson's home. DNA testing showed that a hair found near a pair of pliers on Scott's fishing boat matched Laci's hair. Police also found a homemade anchor on the boat that Scott had purchased shortly before Laci's disappearance. Scott said he used a bag of cement to make the anchor and used the rest to repair his driveway. During the investigation, Detective Henry Dodge Hendy found cement marks on the boat trailer and circular marks that matched the size of a bucket used to drop an anchor. Prosecutors argued that Scott made multiple anchors and may have used them for unknown purposes. Detectives Brocchini and Bueller, using a GPS tracking device attached to Scott's vehicle, tracked him to San Diego. Fearing that Scott might flee to Mexico to avoid arrest, detectives began electronically monitoring his movements. However, they soon discovered that Scott had switched cars, rendering the GPS tracking device ineffective. Why did he run away? Was he the killer? Why did he do it? Stay tuned for further information, the arrest and investigation of Scott Peterson. As the police carried out their increased monitoring of Scott Peterson, they followed his vehicle and listened in on his calls made from his mobile phone. During an interview in 2017, Detective Brocchini stated that we needed to locate Scott without delay. When the bodies were discovered, he was in the vicinity of Brooks Island. I believed that it was a deliberate act. It had been planned out by him. Scott was well familiar with the area, and San Diego was located in close proximity to the border. One may argue that he did not require MapQuest in order to reach Tijuana. While Peterson was on his way to meet his father and brother for a round of golf at the Torrey Pines Golf Course in La Jolla on April 18, 2003, he was taken into custody by law enforcement officers present at the course. Peterson had bleached his hair and beard white, and his car was stuffed with a variety of goods. These items included approximately $15,000 in cash, Viagra tablets, camping and survival gear, several different outfits, 4 mobile phones, and 2 driver's IDs. According to the authorities, the changes in his appearance, the fact that the vehicle was packed, the existence of cash, and the use of various phones all showed that Scott was attempting to disguise himself and flee to Mexico. Sheriff Brocchini and Detective Bueller were responsible for transporting Scott Peterson back to Modesto, where he was subsequently placed in the Stanislaus County Jail. On the 21st of April in the year 2003, Peterson was brought before the Stanislaus County Superior Court to face 2 felony counts of killing with premeditation and extraordinary circumstances. Despite his intelligence, he entered a plea of not guilty. Judge Al Girolami decided to relocate the trial to San Mateo County because of the extensive media attention, the engagement of the community, and the restricted pool of possible jurors in Stanislaus County. This action was taken to prevent allegations of prejudice on the part of jurors and ensure that Peterson was given a fair trial. It was on June 1, 2004, that the trial started, and it received a great deal of interest from the media. It was Rick DiStasso who was in charge of the prosecution, while Garagos was in charge of Peterson's defense. One of the most important witnesses for the prosecution, Amber Frey, retained Gloria Allred as her attorney to represent her. After interviewing all of the jurors for 2 hours in his chambers on June 23, 2004, Judge Alfred DeLucchi decided to remove one of the selected individuals from the jury. It was captured on tape that this juror was having a conversation with Laci Rocha's brother, Brent Rocha. Even though Judge DeLucchi first indicated that this contact did not merit removal, he ultimately decided to reject the prospective juror. According to the record of DeLucchi's session, the juror stated that he and his fiancée, along with other individuals, had previously discussed news items regarding his meeting with Rocha. Moreover, DeLucchi cautioned the remaining members of the jury not to read, watch, or listen to any media coverage of the trial whatsoever. Why was Scott Peterson charged? What evidence was used to convict him of his brutal actions? Keep your eyes peeled for discovery. The prosecution's main argument was that Scott Peterson's romance with Amber Frey prompted his actions. They focused on Scott's actions before and after Laci's disappearance, including his claim that he was playing golf and his questions about whether a police dog was used in the search area where Laci was believed to have been walking her dog. In response, the defense accepted that Scott's extramarital behavior was a moral failing. However, they rejected the prosecution's premise that he would risk his life for Frey to have a quick fling with her. Defense attorney Mark Garagos said the police made hasty assumptions and made snap judgments. It was noted that the police dismissed Scott's claim that Laci was watching a Martha Stewart meringue movie. According to the police, no such portion was aired on television. However, Garagos presented a recording in court that proved that the portion in question was actually about baking meringues. Additionally, Garagos noted the lack of forensic evidence against Scott. The fact that Laci had been on the boat a few days before her disappearance, which could explain the existence of her hair, was the reason he downplayed the relevance of a hair found on Scott's boat. She had been on the boat. Circumstantial evidence and Scott's actions before and after Laci's abduction were largely relied upon by the prosecution because there was no direct evidence linking Scott Peterson to the crime. They gave several reasons for Scott's decision, including his dissatisfaction with his marriage, the pressure he felt from her pregnancy, his desire to continue his affair with Amber Frey, and his growing financial troubles. They also alleged that Scott had built cement anchors to make Laci's body heavier while it was in the San Francisco Bay. During the search for Laci, Sharon Rocha, Laci's mother, gave a statement in which she mentioned that she had observed Scott behaving in a manner that was both distant and inattentive. The fact that Scott did not recognize her when she called out to him in East Loma Park and that he dodged her attempts to hug him was something Sharon had seen. Also, he skipped the candlelight vigil that Laci was supposed to attend. Observers and family members of Scott noted that he showed no signs of emotion during the search. Scott claimed in testimony that he was out golfing, not fishing, with Laci on the day she vanished. Following Laci's disappearance, the prosecution emphasized that Scott's conduct and lifestyle had changed. His alter ego, a car bought in his mother's name, and 2 pornographic channels added to his cable package were all things that were pointed out. In court, a real estate agent testified that Scott had shown an interest in selling the couple's property and had even mentioned that he would prefer it if Laci were discovered alive somewhere. Scott traded Laci's Land Rover for a Dodge pickup vehicle, according to a car salesperson. The jury heard Scott's bogus claims of being in Paris following Laci's disappearance in surreptitiously recorded phone calls, and Amber Frey testified about her involvement with Scott. What weight did these allegations of a desire to end one's life carry? Could you tell me how this trial could unfold? Find out by continuing to watch. Struggle for fairness. Scott Peterson may have been motivated by financial hardship, according to the prosecution's evidence. According to an auditor's testimony, Scott and Laci were living above their means and had accrued $230,000 in credit card debt. Scott had a $50,000 credit limit on other cards and had always paid his bills on time, but the auditor admitted this under cross-examination. Hair samples discovered aboard Scott's yacht became the subject of controversial forensic evidence. Although he was unable to state for sure if the 2 hair follicles recovered from the boat belonged to Scott or Laci, Rodney Oswalt testified that they did not belong to Scott. Through mitochondrial DNA testing, FBI trace evidence specialist Karen Korsberg was able to connect one of the hairs to Laci's hairbrush. Although Laci was not alive when she was on the boat, the prosecution claimed that the hair must have come from her. The defense countered by claiming that Laci was on the boat before she was abducted and questioned the reliability of mitochondrial DNA testing, which is not recognized in all jurisdictions. Although Detective Alan Brocchini admitted to omitting this remark in his report, a witness saw Laci at the shed with the boat the day before she disappeared. According to Mark Garagos, Scott's defense attorney, no anchor was found in San Francisco Bay despite extensive sonar scanning. This was supported by Jeffrey Bayer, the dive leader, who said that even with high-tech sonar equipment, it can be extremely difficult to find anything in rough seas with lots of mud and strong currents. He gave an example to highlight the issue, saying that even though they knew exactly where a sonar device had fallen into the bay, it would still take multiple dives to retrieve it. According to testimony from USGS hydrologist Rick Cheng, Scott may have been fishing in the abandoned Laci area. On the other hand, Chung admitted during cross-examination that he relied on speculation rather than hard data to arrive at his conclusion. With all that said, what will the final decision be? Keep watching this video until the end to find out what happened. Scott Peterson's case led to his conviction. As the jury began deliberating, one of the jurors was excused for misconduct while researching the case himself. Maybe because of conflicts between the jury members or because of outside pressure, the attorney and jury foreman both asked to have him removed from the jury. He said that he was replaced by an alternate juror because he received threats. Scott Peterson was found guilty on 2 counts of murder by a jury on November 12, 2004. He was found guilty of both counts. The trial's punishment phase commenced on November 30, 2004, and ended on December 1, 2004. Scott Peterson was recommended for the death penalty by the jury. Scott Peterson was forced to pay $10,000 towards Laci's funeral expenses and condemned to death by lethal injection by Judge Alfred DeLucchi on March 16, 2005. To emphasize the seriousness and ferocity of the crime, Judge DeLucchi characterized the murder as cruel, merciless, insensitive, and uncaring. This case continues to be a prime illustration of the difficulties and complications of high-stakes criminal prosecutions, especially when they are subject to widespread public attention and heavy media coverage. Scott Peterson's continued existence 20 years after this conviction begs the question, why? What additional information has he divulged that has complicated the world's understanding? Let's investigate. Laci Peterson's death happened 20 years ago. Scott Peterson finally spoke out, shocking everyone. Scott Peterson finally spoke out, shocking everyone. However, 20 years in prison can make you reconsider your case and perhaps bring new evidence to your innocence. He continues to fight for a new trial and is now 51 years old. He explained his version of the story from behind bars, claiming that crucial evidence could have proven his innocence if the police had paid attention to it. He recalled the moment of his conviction, which left him stunned. Angry that the media portrayed him as a neglectful husband, Peterson vented his anger. Their reports, he said, were unfair and false. During his trial, Scott Peterson said he tried to control his emotions so that no one would realize how much they had hurt him. He went on to discuss Amber Frey, his ex-girlfriend, whose testimony played a key role in determining the motive for the crime. Frey's testimony provided evidence to support the theory that Peterson committed the crime because he disliked marriage and parenthood. Peterson stated that he intended to find his family and did not want Amber to get in the way, which is why he continued to talk to her after Laci went missing. A life sentence without parole was substituted for the death penalty in 2020 for Peterson. His current fight for a new trial is being supported by the Innocence Project. According to Peterson, who believes that burglars across the street committed the crime, she may have been kidnapped when she came to investigate. The duct tape found on Laci during the autopsy was never tested for DNA, and his legal team is pushing for more testing. Further evidence that could exonerate Peterson could come from witnesses who saw Laci walking her dog after he left his home that day. But the prosecution is still not convinced. Despite gaining widespread attention as one of the most famous criminal prosecutions of our time, the Scott Peterson case has also been fiercely debated due to its reliance on circumstantial evidence. The media has covered the trial extensively, but the lack of physical evidence is a major problem. One major complaint was that the prosecution failed miserably in its attempt to use physical evidence to directly connect Peterson to the case. There was no prior crime scene, which was a major problem for the case. No evidence of a violent crime was found in the Petersons' home or Scott's car, despite extensive searches by investigators. There was no forensic evidence linking Peterson to Laci's death, including blood, DNA, or any other traces. Laci's murder remains a mystery, making it more difficult for the prosecution to build their case. Their bodies were discovered in San Francisco Bay in April 2003, but their cause of death could not be determined. No murder weapon was found, and the medical examiner's office was inconclusive. The prosecution did not present substantial evidence to support its contention that Peterson dumped the bodies on his boat. Although they discovered DNA evidence from the body that linked a hair on the boat to Laci, the defense maintained that the evidence was not credible. Circumstantial evidence was crucial to the prosecution's case against Peterson, casting doubt on the sufficiency of the evidence of guilt. Furthermore, DNA evidence is not conclusive. So what do you think about the new facts Scott Peterson recently revealed about his innocence in Laci Peterson's death? Do you think Scott Peterson was convicted wrongly?